Hello, everybody. This is Global Warming Skeptic, and this is the Young Turks is Exposed, episode number 13. Today, we got some comments from Jimmy Dore, the resident comedian of the Young Turks, talking about the electoral process and the state of Iowa. Let's hear what he has to say.
The electoral system, again, needs to be gotten rid of. I think it's a bad thing. It takes the campaign away from where the people are.
Which people are you speaking of? Are you talking about where the cities are? Because actually, it's the complete opposite the way the system is set up at the moment. The way the electoral process is set up is so that larger cities in states get all of the say, and the rural areas get none of the say unless the state does not have any large cities. Look at New York, for example. New York City has all the say. Rural New York, whichever way they vote, means very little because it's going to be the opinion of the city of New York that is going to reign supreme over that state. The same thing with Baltimore, Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus in Ohio, Chicago and Illinois, Detroit and Michigan, etc. So here's the thing about that. Your argument falls apart because the way the founding fathers actually intended it is so that rural populations as well as urban populations would have to be focused on. You could not just ignore the rural sections of a state. You would have to focus on that. Early on in our history, when most people were farmers and less of a proportion of people lived in cities, it was fine. But it's gotten so far out of hand that we've essentially gone into a popular vote setting, mostly, at least with the presidential elections, except for Bush Gore, which we don't need to get into. But the point I'm making is this: the system was designed this way for a reason, to give some say to the minority of people. Not a majority of say, but some say where they could be somewhat represented. And that is the whole point. That is why we do not have a straight popular vote. Because of exactly this, and this is the way the system was designed. And it's actually needed more now than ever, with cities becoming larger and larger, and the urban population, or the rural populations, although they're producing tons and tons of stuff, having less and less say. Now, let's hear his other moronic statements.
I mean, if we just had, again, we all see how it works for the Congress, right? The gerrymandering has taken the Democrats get over 1 million votes more, cumulative, coast to coast, and they don't have the representation, right?
First of all, let's cut to this. There's not a shred of evidence, and I dare anybody to post evidence on my video and humiliate me for this statement. There is not a shred of evidence that gerrymandering has impacted any individual election in this country, be it for Congress, governor, or anything. So let me explain to you why it has this appearance. Democrats essentially gerrymander themselves because they do the very things as if it is a popular vote. They appeal to urban populations and ignore rural populations. They don't focus on the farmers anymore, and they keep to their concentrated demographics in the cities. And this is what's causing them problems because they're getting the votes, but they're not representing everybody. The Democrats are only representing those who live in urban areas. And that's where we're at here. It has nothing to do with gerrymandering. Democrats are simply gerrymandering themselves in by creating a very huge discrepancy in cities because it's all their focus, and thus there are huge vote differences in the cities and less in the urban areas or the rural areas where the votes are a lot tighter. Now let's move on to other his statements about Iowa.
Right? So that's what I'm just. It's just weird that we have this system where Iowa has this much influence over the Iowa. Nothing happens in Iowa.
Nothing happens in Iowa. So let me get this straight. The third highest producing agricultural state. There's nothing happening in. All that stuff that you're eating, the bread that you eat, etc. Iowa's the number one producer of corn, the number one producer of soybeans, and you're not getting anything from Iowa. Nothing's happening there. Nobody. What's happening there is just beyond you. It's not big city lights in Iowa. Iowa is a very clean state. There are a lot of good, hardworking people that come out of Iowa. Good, hardworking, humble people, Republicans and Democrats, mind you. It is a very divided state politically, but people are very humble there. The state is very manufacturer and producer friendly. A lot gets made in Iowa, a lot gets processed in Iowa. So to say that nothing is happening in Iowa and that Iowa does not represent the average voter is a bit silly. Iowa is pretty much fully representative of the United States. It has a good mix of urbanization and rural areas. A very, very healthy mix, probably the healthiest in the country. It has some nice places. It is just a very good, clean state. I know a lot of people from Iowa, and they are very, very good people.
No, I've been all over Iowa. Believe me, shit ain't happening, and it's like it's.
Well, maybe they have more time to think about politics then.
Yeah, not really, and they're not big readers. I don't know what the literacy.
Not big readers. In 2013, Iowa had the number one high school graduation rate in the nation. Did you bother to look that up, Jimmy? Of course you didn't. You're a comedian, and that's the whole punchline between this thing. You're a comedian, and yet the Young Turks put you on as a serious panelist. Yeah, you heard that right. The Young Turks, their serious panelist for their power panel is a comedian. This is what they're feeding you guys. People like Jimmy Dore, Jon Stewart, Colbert, Stephen Colbert. These are your informed people. They're comedians. Ha 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 ha. What does that tell you? That tells you that this party, and the Young Turks in particular, they're jokes. They are jokes, not to be taken seriously. They're comedians for a reason. They're not doctors like Dr. Rand Paul and Dr. Ben Carson. They're not businessmen like Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina. And they don't have executive experience. They don't have any experience to fall upon. This is how, folks, you get somebody with a political science degree with no executive experience in Bernie Sanders, a self proclaimed socialist, and somebody under FBI investigation as your front runners and your only candidate with executive experience running at 1.1% of the Democratic vote. This is Obama level stupidity here. And this man, him and that Ronan guy, I guess that they got rid of him. Ronan, I used to call him Ronan the fake comedian. That's what you got to deal with. Anyhow, I just want to get this out there. Um, there's nothing meaningful other than this that I've heard in this video that I could comment on. More stupidity from the Young Turks as usual about Iowa and about our voting process, not understanding why our voting process is the way it is. Anyhow, thank you for listening. God bless.